In this movie, I'll show you how searching layers by name can expedite the process of grouping layers inside of a complex document. But first, I'm going to start things off with this nifty little trick. Over the course of the last few movies, I've been entering all sorts of filtering criteria. For example, my color is set to yellow, my attribute is set to empty, which no longer produces any results. Mode is set to multiply last time around, effect is set to overlay, and so forth. Let's say you want to clear out all of those filter settings. Then what you do is you press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on the little filter switch right there. And that goes ahead and switches you back to kind, and it clears out everything else you've done. Notice the name field is empty, the effect is set back to bevel and emboss, the color down here at the bottom is restored to none, and so forth. All right, I'm going to switch back to kind here so that we can see all the layers inside the image. Now, if you want to be able to search by name, then you need to name your layers. So I can't stress how important it is to assign names to your layers as you're working inside your documents in Photoshop. Then what you do is either switch the search criteria back to name, or another way to work is to go up to the Select menu and choose Find Layers, which has this keyboard shortcut of Mash your fist F. So Control-Shift-Alt-F on a PC, Command-Shift-Option-F on a Mac, and that's going to go ahead and automatically select name as well as activate the name option here. And then you can just go ahead and enter a name, such as ear, for example, in order to show all the ear layers. Now, I don't want this text layer to be part of the group, so I'll click on the top ear layer and shift-click on the bottom one to select this range. And then the way I prefer to work, as opposed to pressing Control-G or Command-G on the Mac, is to go up to the Layers panel flyout menu and then choose New Group from Layers. And that way you'll get this dialog box and you can enter ears for your group name and click OK. And that'll show you that you now have this new group called ears. So it's just a way of confirming that you've done the right thing. Now I'm going to select that name option again and I'll enter arm. And notice, by the way, that I don't want to enter more characters than I need. For example, check out this list here. We've got a total of 5 layers, but if I change this to arms instead of arm, I lose a layer. So just bear that in mind as you work along here. So we want the word arm singular. Then go ahead and press Control-Alt-A or Command-Option-A on the Mac to select all those layers. Go up to the Layers panel flyout menu, choose New Group from Layers, and name the new group arms. Let's do the same for the legs, but this time I'm going to take advantage of the keyboard shortcut. So I'll press Control-Shift-Alt-F or Command-Shift-Option-F on the Mac. And the advantage there is that goes ahead and selects the old name so you can just enter a new one, such as leg singular. And then I'll go ahead and select all these layers by pressing Control-Alt-A or Command-Option-A on the Mac. Click the flyout menu icon, choose New Group from Layers, call the new group legs, and then press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac. One more item we want to search for. We'll press Control-Shift-Alt-F or Command-Shift-Option-F on the Mac in order to select the name, and then I'll enter hair this time around. Press Control-Alt-A or Command-Option-A on the Mac to select all the layers. Go to the flyout menu, choose New Group from Layers, and call the group hair. All right, now at this point, we can reveal all the layers inside the image and get a sense for which layers still need to be grouped by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and clicking on the switch in order to clear out all of our settings. And I can see here up at the top, I've got this highlights layer. I'll turn it off and notice we lose the highlights on the top of the monster's head. So I'll go ahead and turn that back on. The reason I'm showing you that is because there's this other highlights layer right there. If I turn it off, we lose the highlights inside of the eyes. So I ought to go ahead and rename this layer Eye Highlights, like so. And then I'll turn it back on because it's an integral part of this composition. Now notice that not all of the eyes layers are labeled eyes. They don't all have a common word inside of them. For example, we've got pupils and veins. So we're going to have to group these guys manually, but it's a lot easier to tell what's going on because so much of our composition is now grouped. So I'll go ahead and click on Eyelids L, and then I'll scroll down the list to Bag 1, and I'll shift-click on it in order to select this entire range. And this time I'll just press Control-G or Command-G on the Mac in order to group those guys into a group that's automatically named Group 1. And then I'll double-click on that and rename it Eyes. Now I'll click on Nose Holes right there, and I'll just scroll down the list until I come to the Arms group. I'll shift-click on Mouth Crease, the layer right above, and I'll press Control G or Command G on the Mac in order to group those layers together, and I'll rename this group Nose and Mouth. So obviously I have a sense of what's going on inside of this composition. Now notice hand shadows right there. Doesn't contain the word arm, so it didn't end up going into the arms group, but it really ought to, because it represents these shadows behind the arms that are being cast onto the creature's body. So I'll just go ahead and grab that layer and drag it and drop it onto the group. And if you twirl open the arms group now, you'll see that hand shadows automatically appears at the back of the group. So whenever you drag and drop a layer into a closed group, it appears at the bottom of that stack. And then if that's not what you want, you can move it to a different location. But as it turns out, that is what we want. So I'll go ahead and twirl arms close. Then I'll click on belt loops and scroll down until I come to size tag, which represents all the clothes associated with this guy. And I'll press Control G or Command G on the Mac in order to group those guys together. And I'll rename this group Clothing. And then I'll click on Button, Shift click on Body. So these 4 layers right there. Press Control G, Command G on the Mac, and rename this layer Body. Then notice I've got this layer right here called Curly Q. That's this curling hair near the top of the monster. Obviously, it is a hair, so I need to drag it and drop it into the hair group. That'll land it at the bottom of that group, which is just fine, really doesn't matter. And then I've got these 2 shadow layers right there, which represent the shadow in front of the creature's body. I'll go ahead and select both of them. Press Control G or Command G on the Mac to group them together and rename this group Shadow. And notice we now have a much tidier group of layers inside of the Layers panel. In fact, I can see almost all these layers and groups at a glance, even on this very tiny screen. And now if you want to review your groups and make sure everything's organized the way it should be, then you can Alt-click or Option-click on the eye in front of the body layer, and sure enough, there are all the layers that make up the body. I'll go ahead and turn on the legs and the arms groups as well. Might as well turn on these 2 background items, Forest and Contrast. Don't turn on the Fade layer, however. And I can turn on both the hair and the ears groups, and we get the hair and the ears inside the image window. I'll turn on nose and mouth and eyes, and that fills in all the features inside the monster's face. Turn on shadow, that's the shadow that's being cast in front of the monster. Go ahead and scroll up the list and turn on this highlights layer for the highlights on top of his head. He's a little bit nude at this point, so to provide him with some dignity, I'll turn on the clothing group in order to add his belts and his cutoffs and so forth. So assuming you've taken the time to name your layers, that's how you search your layers by name in order to make quick work of grouping here inside Photoshop.